Hello everybody and welcome to a new video on my channel, this time about Argo CD, which is, as you can see, a declarative GitOps continuous delivery tool for Kubernetes. Much like the one that I discussed on my blog.baka.info, which was Flux, so Flux CD. This is a comparative tool, but it does many things in a different way. I will quickly take a look in this video how to install it and how to basically get it to work. Of course, I have a cluster running already. It's a cluster on Azure. It's an AKS cluster. Doesn't really matter. Any cluster will do, right? Now, how do we actually get started? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to make sure that we get Argo installed, and I have a node for that, which is here. And first of all, we're going to create the namespace. Yeah, that one I didn't actually have to copy, but okay. Let's paste it here. We create the Argo CD namespace, and then we get to the node again, and here we have the command to install it. So basically, from the YAML file on GitHub, we install the Argo CD software. Yeah, so that's, well, let's say very easy to do. And I'll modify my screen layout a little bit here so you can see what was done. So custom resource definitions were created, cluster roles, cluster role bindings, some config maps. You can read it there. And of course, at the bottom, the actual software that does all the magic is installed via deployments. And we'll basically work with the bottom one there, Argo CD server, which is the API server. Gonna interact with that one to get everything configured properly. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing you would have to do is actually to install the CLI. And the CLI, if you're on Mac, can be installed with Homebrew. First of all, add an extra tab, which is Argo project / tab. And we already did that before, of course, but that's the command you would have to run. And then you would actually do brew install. So let's see when this is finished, how to install the CLI. Yeah, there was an update as well now, so that's fine. So brew install, Argo project tab, and then the tool is called Argo CD. Let's install that, or pretend we're gonna install it because we're already installed. And then now you can run the tool with Argo CD here. But yeah, that's of course not enough. What we have to do now is make sure that we can connect to the API server. And if you take a look, if you get the services in the namespace Argo CD, there's a service there which is using cluster IP. It's called Argo CD server, and that's the one that we have to connect to. Now, it's not exposed, as you can see, by default on the internet. You can do that, of course, with a load balancer or with an ingress definition, or if you're just playing around and testing how it works, just port forward that service to your own local machine. We will do that. So I'm going to use this one over here. I'm going to say K port forward. What do we want to port forward? A service. The service is Argo CD server. The namespace is Argo CD, and we're going to map port 8080 to port 443 of the service. Yeah, and I typed something wrong. Yes, because the namespace is Argo CD and not Argo. So our port forward has happened now. Basically means that we can actually connect with our browser. So HTTPS localhost 8080. Yeah, we'll get this. It's normal because it's an untrusted certificate which is being used. And here you have Argo CD. Now there's one user defined, which is admin, but I don't have the password, right? How do I get the password? Well, that's not too complicated, because if you get the pods in the namespace, the password actually is the name of the Argo CD server pod, right? So to actually get that changed, what we'll do is the following. We'll use the command line tool, Argo CD login, to log in to local host on port 8080. That's our local port forward to the API server. We're going to log in with the admin account. So admin, and then we are going to copy the server Argo CD server pod. We're gonna copy that and paste it as the password. So we're logged in correctly. Now we can use Argo CD account update password to update the password, of course. So we paste in the old one, and the new one, I'm gonna take a very secure password here, which of course is not secure. Password updated. That basically means that we can connect with that password that I just modified to the interface. Now, as you can see, it's great, but there are no applications yet. So now we need to tell the system, right? We need to get some application definitions, and you need to connect them or install them on the cluster. Now Argo CD has the concept of apps, and an app is basically a definition of your application, and you connect that to a Git repo. So it means also that you can have multiple apps and multiple Git repos where your app definitions are coming from. Where with Flux, you typically had only one repo for your entire cluster. So it's quite a bit different how this works. Now we could create an application here in the UI, or we can create it using the CLI, right? Now before we do that, we actually want to have a Git repository with our application in it. Now I already have that, yeah? If you go to GitHub, which is my space on GitHub, you go to repositories, there's an Argo demo here. And the Argo demo has a manifests folder. The manifests folder has only 3 YAML files. We don't do anything complicated here, so we don't use Jsonnet or Kustomize or whatever. We just use plain YAML files to deploy an application and its prerequisites. Now, on my cluster, I have all sorts of other software running. For example, I have an Nginx ingress controller running. I also have cert manager running. Indeed, it's also an important one that is being used, and also have external DNS running. So there are all kinds of references within these YAML files to those pieces of software. So if you run this on a plain cluster, yeah, this of course won't work. So typically that's not really what you would do, because you wouldn't want to have your app completely self-maintained and described here within these YAML files. But for demo purposes, we'll just use this one here. The app also is using Cert Manager with Let's Encrypt. Now Let's Encrypt, we didn't define the issuers for Let's Encrypt, so we first define the issuers here. We will use the Let's Encrypt staging issuer to make sure we get a staging certificate from Let's Encrypt. So that's what this YAML is doing. And then, yeah, the actual application in this case is Redis backend. So we install Redis, as you can see. We have a Redis service to connect to Redis. We have a deployment, which is a simple web application that uses Redis as the backend to display real-time updates in the browser coming from a Redis channel. Then we have the application service, cluster IP, of course. And then we have an ingress definition. And here we make sure that on the ingress, we also define a certificate. Yeah, What we also do here is we have a host name called real.baka.info. With the integration of external DNS, there will be a record for this. This A record will be in my zone, which is hosted over at Cloudflare. Now that's just prerequisites for this specific application. What matters is that you have a Git repository and that you have a couple of manifests in some folder, and you want to connect that to an app in Argo. Okay, let's see how that would work. And I'm going to use a CLI for this to basically create that app. So we use Argo CD app create, and we are going to call the app real-time, right? Then we're going to use the repository I've just shown you. Yeah. So we reach out to github.com, to Gebake, to Argo demo.git. Yeah. Now you have seen that everything is in a path called manifests. So we have to specify the path that this app will have to look into. And we look in that path and apply, basically a kubectl apply, all the YAML files within the manifests folder. Now, the destination server should also be set. In this case, Argo is running on the same Kubernetes cluster where we deploy the app. So in this case, we can just use HTTPS and then use the Kubernetes service.default.svc. It's perfectly possible to have Argo running on one cluster and then deploy to other clusters. Yeah? That's what this thing is for, the destination server. But in this case, in our case, we don't need that. And of course, the destination namespace, we should set that as well normally. Now I'm going to install in default. Typically you wouldn't do that, but let's do this here for demo purposes. So this creates an app based on the YAML files you've seen earlier within that Git repository. Let's see if this works. You can see the connection going to the API server as well. The application has been created. If all's working well, you should see this also in the user interface. So let's go to Argo CD, and indeed, you suddenly see an application called real-time here with some properties. For example, you see that it's out of sync, but the repository has been listed and the manifests path has been set as well. We can click on this application and then see how this application is built up. Now, of course, not much can be seen yet because the actual application of the YAML files has not been done yet. So the YAML files haven't been synced with the cluster yet. That's something you can configure, that's auto syncing and so on, but by default, if you create the app like I've shown you just a moment ago, then you get this and you have to sync the app, right? So if you click on sync now, Argo CD will reach out to the Git repository and start applying, or actually it already reached out to the Git repo, but now we will sync the contents, what he found, with the cluster. So let's click on that. We can do a dry run and all kinds of stuff. We're going to just do synchronize now. Let's keep things simple. Synchronize and let it do its magic. Synchronization is starting. Now you see much more interesting stuff happening. You see indeed that my real-time app service is here. You have the endpoints as well, the Redis app service and the endpoints, and the real-time app deployment. That's basically my web front end, my Redis backend. Here you see the Redis backend replica set, of course. It's deployment replica set, and then my pods. So in the end, I have two pods running, the real-time app and the Redis app pod. Then I have my Let's Encrypt issuers, and then I have my ingress definition. The ingress also defines a certificate. Certificate is being requested from Let's Encrypt via a certificate request. That becomes an order as well. And in the end, you have a challenge, and the challenge creates a solver, and so on and so on. So it's really nice what Argo CD is doing, that you have great visibility into what the application is, what the components are. And the nice thing is also that you can just click, for example, on my real-time app deployment. You can click on that. You can see the manifest which has been applied to the cluster, the events which are behind it, and so on. So it's really great that this can be done in that way. Yeah. So I can close this. For example, my pod as well. I can click on my pod. The pod manifest is here, but I can also see, for example, the logs of my pod, which are not great. Just basically does this Redis connection thing, right? So logging hasn't been configured all too great within my real-time app that I wrote quite a while ago. So great, we have now created the application and we have synced it. Now what you can do, of course, is you can go into the app details, and in the app details there's this thing called a sync policy, right? And the sync policy, by default, there is none, and so it doesn't auto sync. You can enable auto sync, which actually tells Argo to once in a while check the Git repo, and if changes are to be found, to apply those changes, right? The other options I won't actually look at yet or in this video. We just do the basics here today. Now it can take quite a while before everything is properly done. So it can take quite a while until Let's Encrypt gives me the certificate, and so on and so on. But we can try it out. We can take a look. So if you look at the ingress definition, we see that we specified real.baka.info. Well, we can try this already. Yeah. So let's go to https real.baka.info. And it says it's not, the connection is not secure. Well, let's try it anyway. We click. Yeah, that's the app. Let's click on not secure. Let's click on the certificate, and what we see here is not the correct one yet. So maybe there's some caching going on. I'm not sure. So as I said, it can take a while before the certificate gets issued. No, it's still that one. Now let's look at that. So we can actually ask for get cert, and yeah, that's still false. Then get certificate request, that's also still false. And if we do describe certificate request and we do the following, we'll probably see that the cluster issuer is not yet found, and it has to do with like dependencies, right? So probably the cluster issuer wasn't created yet before my ingress was created, and it takes a while now for this all to be reconciled. So we just leave it as it is for now. The certificate, it's not too important. We can check it back later. But what you can see is that the app has been installed. This version of the app, you can see with this ugly color in the background. If we check our repository and we look at realtime.yaml, you see that we are using 1.0.5, right? Now, if I want to modify this, and now let's do it in GitHub. If I want to modify this to, for example, 1.5.6, which I do believe has an even uglier color, and we commit it right away in GitHub. Just a test, of course. We now updated the image name, so we modified the image tag to 1.0.6, and now we can either wait for the application to be updated, or just in my case do a synchronization. I refreshed it, it's synchronizing again, and what we are seeing now is that indeed our deployment is or went to revision 2. Revision 2 got deployed based on the new image, and here you see that this one is now being terminated. So all in real time you see this. If I click on the actual pod in my new deployment, you should see that I'm using 1.0.6, and if I'm nicely refreshing this here, the color is even uglier, right? Maybe I have a different certificate already. I'm not sure. Let's check it out. No, not yet. So the Let's Encrypt certificate is not there yet. But that's not the most important thing from this demo. So what have you seen? Well, we have installed the Argo CD software on our cluster. That gives you this nice UI as well to see all the different applications. We discussed indeed the concept of applications, and you define these applications. Every application is linked to a repository, which is different from some other tools, which has only one repository linked to that tool. And you either do your work within the UI, or more often than not, you do your work using the Argo CD CLI here, as we have shown by creating this application. Great. This was a quick look at Argo CD, how to install it, how it works. Thanks for watching.